I've decided that this year will be my last one. I've let the CBC know that I'd like to step down from the National next July 1st.
And here we are. In just a few days, Peter Mansbridge will be a retiree. The end of nearly 30 years as the voice of this program and as chief correspondent, the face of CBC News. For you, the viewers of the National, and for us, his colleagues, it is a big moment. And we want to take a few minutes tonight to say goodbye. We thought the best way to do that was to look at what we all share, his journalism. And we thought, who better to do that than a former longtime colleague of Peter's who had a distinguished CBC News career of his own. Here's David Halton.
How to capture a career nearly 50 years in the making. For Peters, it helps that along the way the cameras were rolling. A life's work documented in real time. In other words, there's a record, and what a record it is. Stories, thousands of them, snapshots, bringing you back to specific times and places. A kaleidoscope of images, working backwards and forwards as memory does. Though let's state the obvious up front. Too much has happened to cover fully, as you know all too well. Because here's the thing. Peter's journalism is yours more than his. He helped report stories, you lived through them. In recalling his work, we reconnect with our own past and its seeming paradox. For all that has changed,
because it's 2015.
And so dramatically at that, there remains a fundamental Canadian continuity.
If there's one area of the country...
Peter's career can be a touchstone for both. For that story, we'll start where he did. Scratchy radio reports from northern Manitoba, from a voice that would stitch itself into the Canadian fabric.
Good evening. I'm Peter Mansbridge. I live in Churchill, the struggling northern town on the desolate shores of Hudson Bay.
A first employment document gives no inkling of the career to come, just another casual hire, use as needed for the radio service or on television.
The sale was announced last week by the Minister of Public Works, Mr. Borowski. On the other side of this river is International Falls, Minnesota.
Pretty soon, his beat covered Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But digging, sometimes in the dirt of local stories, got him noticed.
Pig farming isn't an easy business. For one thing, it smells, and it smells a lot. The industry questions the dependability of future Saskatchewan potash deliveries.
And so it was on to Ottawa, to a news bureau teeming with no-nonsense journalists. The start of a 40-year commitment to the story of Canadian politics.
Peter, from the beginning, was a very good reporter, and he was especially a very good political reporter.
And it now appears that atomic energy is being stonewalled by its own partner. On the question of when he might seek a new federal mandate for his views, Trudeau was as evasive as ever.
He had an instinct, he had intelligence, and he had really a passion for figuring out how our system worked, and the people in the system were fascinating to him.
And instead of asking you which way you'll go on the vote, do you agree with the idea of Petrochem being the sole importer of oil?
Well, if you look back in
Federal elections were the centerpiece, and on that score, Peter's role changed through the years.
And go out and make the nation grow.
The final days of this campaign will keep Clark in BC for most of the weekend.
At first, he followed leaders on the campaign trail. Pretty soon, he was working in the election night studio, feeding information to Knowlton Nash.
Is it really true that Jack Hare, the Conservatives, occasionally has campaigned in a bunny suit?
That's what I hear. He's also campaigned in roller skates, running shoes. The Liberal is not much different. He goes out on the... He goes out on bridges in St. Boniface and stands up and waves at the cars as they go by with his sign.
I'm Knowlton Nash for CBC News. Good night.
After Knowlton retired, Peter, as chief correspondent, began to drive CBC's election coverage himself.
I'm Peter Mansbridge. Let's bring you right up to date. David Halton, our chief political correspondent, has watched a lot of elections.
Peter on election night was amazing to watch. He knows exactly what question to ask at what time. He knows exactly when to interrupt. He knows exactly when to let the story play out.
Having seen the Atlantic Canada results, and I agree with you, they got to lose a lot of seats to be in real trouble here tonight. But one of the things
it is like watching Glenn Gould play.
Through it all, as one Prime Minister gave way to the next.
Great scandal, Mrs. Speaker.
In defending our record.
Their time is up.
I would ask members to try to restrain themselves.
A singular theme was constant. Politics mattered.
Peter understands why there's a lot of cynicism about politics, but I think he fights not to be cynical about politics. And I think that's right.
That's staggeringly high unemployment.
Part of the job is to question those leaders on behalf of Canadians, at first alongside yours truly.
You're just months away from an election.
We don't know.
Later, on his own.
What our involvement would be in Afghanistan, not somebody who believes in term limits.
I think term limits are up to the voter.
Gotcha journalism was never the point. Public service was.
That's why the At Issue panel exists. Peter created it because he thinks politics is important and because he thinks Canadians shouldn't just be viewers or become cynical of politics, but understand it a little bit better.
From regional battles over resources, the economy, and government funding, to Quebec's role in the Constitution.
Here's the scene at the Yes Side headquarters, the dejection on their faces of coming so close.
News Magazine. From Canada's failure of its Indigenous population to the revolution on Canada's political right.
This party address issues of language and immigration.
Is there a right and wrong anymore on the deficit issue?
And what's the advice here to David Johnson?
At Issue has helped drive Canada's political conversation. Politics may have had its moments since the 1970s. But for a story of dramatic change felt by Canadians everywhere, can anything rival the revolution in technology?
The electronic web, the threat to privacy in the computer age.
At the CBC, this worked on two levels. First, it was an ongoing source of news.
Tonight on Quarterly Report, a look at the dark side of the information revolution.
Well, it appears Facebook has lived up to its commitment to address privacy concerns.
As much as devices are the lifeblood for Canadians today, it's easy to forget that not long ago they were novelties.
Well, there's a revolution going on in rec rooms, offices, and classrooms around the world through a computer network called Internet. It's the little gadget that can. The iPhone is causing a buzz.
But inside the CBC, tech was more than a story. Computers, software, mobile phones changed the way that journalism got done. What didn't change was Peter's role in making the program.
Peter is a journalist. The National went on the air at 9 o'clock. He didn't walk in at 8:30 and say, well, very nice, and go out and read it.
You've got to try to sell the lobster story without making it sound like a lobster story. I'll tell you what was interesting about our coverage, as opposed to everybody else's coverage, is we dealt with what the options were and we explained it.
His involvement always extended to supporting reporters in the field.
There's a sense here that the ground
Just
is
about
shifted.
all Cubans.
You can see the extent of the devastation.
It was a day of anger,
Florida
shouting.
is absolutely critical to the outcome.
Lamont are used to the occasional
Ukraine's
visitor.
new president promised that Wet'suwet'en will become the 12th First Nations community to be
it's
under that
weird being on TV, right? It's weird about the way you look, the way you dress, the way you talk, and he has been so good about saying, I don't care, I just want you to be comfortable and I just want you to be you. From someone like him, for somebody like me, has meant kind of the world. It's sort of given me permission to just ease into who I am and to be comfortable.
He was a very powerful force. Understand, it's not easy to stand up to Peter Mansbridge, but he wanted you to. He wanted to discuss what the National would look like.
What he wanted it to look like was a public broadcaster.
So when Peter got the job, I phoned him up to congratulate him, and he said to me, I'm thinking of what I should say on my sign-off, and here's what I'm thinking. Thank you for watching. And I thought, that's perfect, because Peter had always been someone, and is always someone, who really sees the audience as part of journalism, as part of what journalism is about.
This was a 5-story building. What people don't know, whether there's anybody alive in there.
Peter believed in showing the hard stories.
15,000 came in just the latest wave. This is what starvation looks like in the capital, Juba.
Take the recent coverage of the humanitarian crisis in South Sudan.
It's really a hard thing to look at. And no one tells a story like that better than Margaret, you know, with the compassion of that. And Peter saw that, and he elevated it, and he said, we will lead with this, not once, not twice, 3 times this week. This is what our place is as a public broadcaster, and we will be heard on this. Those people in South Sudan will be heard.
Wow, this is freezing. This is just cold air blowing through here. You got a lot of mold in here.
He pushed for the difficult Canadian stories as well.
So for Canadians who've been wondering why aren't some of the neediest in Attawapiskat already in those new homes, what's the holdup?
From places like Attawapiskat, where desperately needed change is too slow to arrive, to a broadcast of the National from an icebreaker in the Northwest Passage, where unwanted change is happening too fast.
Tonight on our program, we'll look at the science of climate change and the science of Arctic sovereignty that's so critical for Canada's claims here inside the Arctic Circle.
To show Canada to Canadians was the idea behind road stories like that one. Over the years, this country's map has been dotted by the arrival of the national crew, Peter in tow, ready with a take on the day's burning regional issue, giving the rest of Canada a closer look. Of course, dramatic changes overseas mattered to Canadians as well. In the late 70s, the Vietnamese boat people rocked the world's conscience.
Well, the people on this boat seem pretty happy now. They've made their long journey in from Vietnam. The joy of this moment could be short-lived, because what's ahead is refugee camps that are squalid, that are overcrowded, and that are full of uncertain people.
A decade later, Berlin's iconic wall seized global attention.
The numbers of those coming over from East Germany are staggering. More than 2 million are said to have come over to taste what has been forbidden for 28 years.
It gets me a chance to just go up north where there's been a little bit of action.
Peter went to Afghanistan, where Canadians were fighting and dying, partly in aid of a fledgling democracy.
Voter registration in this country is painfully slow. So far, less than 10% of the country's 10 million eligible voters have registered, less than 2% of women.
Over the years, Peter spent less time in the field, but he continued to break stories, like the night Pierre Trudeau died.
And I said, well, that's a pretty good story. And I got the network to come to us. That is to say, I told Master Control, and again, in this day and age, I know this will be hard to believe, but the program I took off the air to put the death of Pierre Trudeau on was the Olympics. I pulled the Olympics off the air on Peter Mansbridge's word that Pierre Trudeau had died.
Here is a bulletin from CBC News.
Hello from Toronto, I'm Peter Mansbridge. Just moments ago, the Right Honourable Pierre Elliott Trudeau passed away.
And he said, I sure hope we're right about this. And I said to him, well, if it's not right, it's our last story we're ever going to do, so I hope we enjoy the night.
Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey, has died, aged 88.
Peter helped inform viewers of many important passings.
After months of illness, Mandela died today. Short and tragic life of Diana, Princess of Wales.
People whose lives, work, or values held special meaning for Canadians.
Thanks for your joy. We all know that Mr. Layton has been fighting a battle with cancer. We've learned that he passed away.
And whose deaths inspired a collective pause.
Programs normally seen at this time have been...
None more so than that of Terry Fox.
But the past 12 months has brought us a new kind of courage and dedication in the form of a young man who suddenly made us realize that no goal is too great to be reached for, and that no dream is too great to be imagined.
Part of Peter's job is finding the right words, the right tone.
Just for those who are just joining us, video of the second attack on the World Trade Center by a hijacked aircraft.
Especially in times of crisis, when the facts are uncertain.
On a day like 9/11, when you couldn't do homework because we had never seen this before, and yet he did exactly what you'd want your anchor to do: be calm, be serious, understand what was going on, put things in context.
Within 90 minutes from that point, both towers had collapsed under the strain of the damage that had been done structurally to both towers. And obviously, the resulting damage is just almost too hard to comprehend.
From that day forward, acts of global terrorism and the responses to them have changed the way we see the world. When Parliament Hill itself came under attack, Peter steered CBC News' understated coverage.
And there's kind of a security area there. Now, whether that's where the first shooting took place or not, I don't know. But clearly the gunman got past there because we can see it on that video shot by the Globe.
It's hard to know when to stop looking back. The range of stories matches the lived events.
Hello, I'm Mark Garneau.
This country's participation in the reach for the stars.
As a 9-year-old kid, thinking that someday maybe I might have a chance to fly in space.
Our devotion to the national game.
Canada, you've got another gold. Canada wins gold in overtime.
The evolution in the acceptance of love in all its forms. The artistry of musicians, proudly exported to the world.
Got to your house this morning.
How deeply their work and their lives touch us here at home.
Until the next time, Gord.
A little kiss. Yeah.
Change and continuity.
The Maple Leaf of Canada.
Canada has been marked by both over the past half-century. So has CBC News. And no one personifies that more than Peter. Now, with his retirement, another major shift is imminent. But he would be the first to say that's not the significant point. The digging, the reporting, the storytelling that motivated him continue to motivate others just as much. That, he'd say, is the key. And that is his legacy. The journalism, public, national, Canadian, on it will go.
Ready to go directly?
But for now, we'll give you-know-who the last word.
For CBC News, I'm Peter Mansbridge. I'm Peter Mansbridge. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching.